Today we're talking about an underused but much loved and for many favorite Marvel character from the Bronze Age of comic books, someone who was lovingly drawn and written by titans of the time. That someone is Jack Hart, also known as Jack of Hearts. Let's talk about him. Before we do, thanks for watching JLS Comics. If you liked the video, hit the thumbs up and subscribe. I do upload videos just like this every week. Alright, let's jump into our story. Jack of Hearts first appeared in 1976 in the 22nd issue of a Marvel Comics magazine called Deadly Hands of Kung Fu. He was created by writer Bill Mantlo and artist Keith Giffen, although in an interview, Keith said that Jack was 2/3 put together by the time he came on the book. Jack's costume has an intricate playing card border design, and the creative team struggled to keep it consistent for the first couple of years. That is, until Dave Cockrum designed a character model sheet for the artists and coloring departments to lean on as a reference. As is told in Marvel Premiere 44, Dave's design became the definitive design for Jack from that point on. Jonathan Jack Hart was born in New Haven, Connecticut to Philip and Marie Hart. Philip was a scientist who created a liquid energy called zero fluid. His mother, an alien from a species called Contraxians. When the sun orbiting the planet Contraxia was dying, the Contraxians sought out an energy source with which they could give their sun new life and save them from extinction. So they sent out emissaries and explorers into the cosmos to find something, anything to kickstart their sun. Marie went to Earth and took on a human form and found Philip and his zero fluid. When Marie met Philip, they fell in love, married, and had a son, somehow, that they named Jack. When Jack was a young boy, Marie perished in a car accident. As the official handbook of Marvel Universe notes, an autopsy on Marie was not done, and so neither Jack nor Philip learned of her alien roots, although this was retconned later. As Jack grew up, his father Philip continued to work on his zero fluid. When Jack was in college, his father finally perfected it, and instead of profiting off of it, chose to donate zero fluid to the world as a totally clean, powerful, and free source of energy in the form of liquid fuel. And this too was sort of retconned later on. We'll get to that. But a criminal organization called the Corporation wanted it for themselves and ended up killing Philip right in front of young Jack on the very day Jack graduated from college. Philip was dead before he hit the floor, Jack said. After witnessing this, Jack ran into his father's basement laboratory to hide, and the Corporation chased him down there and shot at him with their laser cannon, and they missed the boy but struck a zero fluid vat which flooded out of the containment chamber and washed over Jack, which imbued his body with this very same energy and which also turned half of his body purple. This was also retconned later. It was originally thought that this was a permanent staining due to the chemicals, but when it was revealed that he's half Contraxian and they have a split pigment, this became a catalyst, not unlike Terrigen Mist, for Inhumans, which activated his latent, dormant cellular activity. He wasn't able to control this energy though, and a flash burst of it killed his father's murderers. He then cobbled together pieces of his father's armor collection to make himself a suit of armor, which also acted as a containment suit for this new energy emanating from his own body. This articulated armor suit is made of boron whisker impregnated steel alloy cloth. Jack is also able to discharge his energy as concussive blasts from his hands and use it to propel him in the air for flight as if it were rocket fuel. As a tribute to his father who loved playing cards, Jack took on the name Jack of Hearts and sought revenge against the Corporation. This revenge quest brought him to Hector Ayala, the White Tiger, and in their first fight, Jack declared, "I am the judge and the fury, and I have found you guilty." Furiously, he told White Tiger, "I know you're guilty and I intend to prove it with trial by fire." Jack was convinced at first that it was White Tiger who was working with the Corporation who had killed his father. But after they tumbled off a rooftop during a fight, Jack was injured, and so White Tiger brought him to a hospital. The team in the ICU took off Jack's armor to try to treat his broken bones, but then his body without the protection started exploding. White Tiger went to his bedside, grabbed his wrists, and helped diffuse his power and calm him down. The Corporation then sent mercenaries into the hospital to retrieve the wounded Jack, but White Tiger fought them off to protect his new friend. Jack then teamed up with Iron Fist, Shang-Chi, and White Tiger, the Sons of the Tiger, ultimately finding and defeating his father's killer, Shrike. After this, Jack of Hearts made his debut in a color, traditional-sized comic book in the summer of 1977 with Incredible Hulk issues 213 and 214, where he literally smashed down a door and called some gangsters turkeys. This as he continued his revenge quest against those who slew his father. As he defeated the punks and left them for the cops, he got word that Hulk was rampaging once more. But unbeknownst to Jack and really everybody else in the city, Hulk was protecting a boy named Jim Wilson, and so Jack hunted down the Hulk, once again rushing into battle without knowing the full scope of the situation, just like he did with White Tiger. In their battle, Hulk kept calling Jack Splitface. Jack tried to lure Hulk away from some firefighters who were fighting a blaze aboard a ship, but only managed to enrage the Jade Giant. Jack was only able to stay in the fight because his zero fluid body kept healing itself. The two fought in the ruins of the burning ship, and as it blew up, Jack was ejected from the rubble and Hulk disappeared. Jack said he won, even after learning that Hulk wasn't bad, and his firefighters congratulated him at the end of the battle. He said he didn't feel good about the fight. Jack then appeared as Jack Hart in Iron Man issue 102, where he saw a car chase where S.H.I.E.L.'s Jasper Sitwell was pursuing Madame Mask disguised as Chrissy Longfellow and Harry Key, who had just stolen patents from Tony Stark, who was off battling with the Mandarin and Dread Knight. Jack was featured on the cover of the next issue fighting Iron Man with art by George Perez and Mike Esposito. Madame Mask was working with a villain named Midas, who'd taken over Stark Industries by buying out all of the shareholders, so when Stark came back to Stark International's HQ, Midas's occupying forces attacked Iron Man. So by the time Jack got there, what he saw was a berserking Iron Man attacking a Stark building. Jack quickly transformed into Jack of Hearts and flew up to intercept him. And the two fought with a flurry of furious repulsor and energy blasts and clenched fists. Iron Man thought Jack was working with Midas, and when he heard Iron Man comment on this, Jack realized he might be on the wrong side, that he could be, as he thought to himself, a, quote, hot-headed young idiot, end quote. Iron Man revealed a buzzsaw weapon in his forearm armor and ended up cutting Jack's armor. So without his energy contained, Jack started to expel his energy uncontrollably. Iron Man quickly and rightfully deduced that while he wears armor to protect himself, Jack wears armor to protect others. On the ground, Iron Man nearly attacked Midas when he realized what he'd done, but Jack and Madame Mask stopped him, telling him that he'd ruin his chances in court if he fought Midas now. Iron Man 103 is an important evolution to Jack's story for a couple reasons. First, the plot developments we just went over, but the book also features an essay by Bill Mantlo. This was around the time that a new editor came into Marvel, a man named Big Jim Shooter, and Big Jim sought to shake things up in the mighty Marvel bullpen. One of the things he did was to take Mantlo off of Iron Man, but instead of just leaving him and others without work, Jim wanted to see what they could do with other titles and characters. So Mantlo campaigned on behalf of Jack of Hearts, telling readers to buy a copy or two of his issues and to write in to the letters page requesting more of Jack. This would come to fruition just 2 months after his stint on Iron Man ended. So back to the story, Jack then teamed up with a police captain named Gene DeWolf, a detective sergeant named Michael O'Brien, aka the Guardsman, Eddie March, as well as Brian DeWolf, aka the Wraith. The Wraith had drawn Jack to the meeting as he sensed their goals aligned, and this just as Nick Fury and Jasper Sitwell arrived to organize a raid on the Midas-controlled Stark Industries. So they all went to find Iron Man and Madame Mask to convince him to go after Midas now, since it was now appropriate, and when they did, they ran into an army of Midas-controlled Iron Man armors. That's when Midas appeared and turned Jack, Iron Man, and the team into gold. But because of Jack's physiology, due to being exposed to zero fluid, he was able to change back to his normal body, escaping his gold prison. It turns out that only Iron Man's armor turned gold, and he too was able to escape, and then with the last-minute help from a psychic named Marion Rogers, they won. Jack was also exposed to a scanalyzer from Stark International, which was powered by a symbiote energy sump device that derived low-level energy from his body. This device was originally designed to hold another being named Nuclo. The AI from the scanalyzer accidentally yet favorably overlaid his encephalic patterns with that of the AI, and the mutagenic change allowed him to now think at computer AI speeds. After their victory in the war with Midas, Iron Man took Jack of Hearts on as an apprentice. And so Jack helped Iron Man fight Crimson Dynamo, Darkstar, and Vanguard of the Soviet super soldiers on the moon. But then they teamed up to fight some Rigelian colonizers with help from High Evolutionary's animal people called the Knights of Wundagore. Mantlo's campaigning and Shooter's shakeup was a success, and so Marvel decided to give Jack a solo story. And to do that, they'd put him in one of their tryout titles called Marvel Premiere. And so Jack showed up there with issue 44. And this title revealed that Jack Hart now had a butler named Major Martins, who was also the radiologist assigned by S.H.I.E.L.D. to study and evaluate Jack's powers. Mantlo wanted to add Jack to the Champions book too, but it was canceled, so he didn't have time. Jack then showed up in a title called The Defenders, along with a host of heroes for a story called Membership Madness. Jack of Hearts then fought with Ben Grimm, the Thing, who was being controlled by Sam Saxon, a supervillain named Machine Smith. And then Jack squared off against Rom the Space Knight. Rom was killing dire wraiths disguised in human bodies, and witnesses thought he was on a bloodthirsty rampage, so they dispatched Jack of Hearts to confront Rom. Rom fired his neutralizer at Jack, but it had no effect, and Jack's energy blasts at Rom were so intense that they burned marks into Rom's armor. Armor, mind you, that has withstood the fiery heat and energy of countless stars. Rom flew into space and Jack followed, with Rom noting that Jack is pure energy and has no need for oxygen in the vacuum of space. Rom absorbed too much of Jack's energy and went supernova, and the blast knocked Jack back to Earth as Rom slowly tumbled through the upper limits of Earth's atmosphere, burning upon re-entry and crashing into the sea. Jack of Hearts had beaten Rom the Space Knight. Jack was next seen with Quasar at Project Pegasus as Quasar was conducting energy tests on Jack. And this just as they and the rest of the Earth's heroes were transported to fight in Marvel's first event, the Contest of Champions. In Marvel Team Up issue 134, Jack was paired with Peter Parker, Spider-Man, as well as Marcy Kane. Marcy worked as a teacher's assistant at Empire University, where she met Peter Parker as well as Jack Hart, a guy she'd have a brief fling with. In 1983, after years of magazine and guest appearances, Jack finally got his own title in the form of a 4-issue miniseries. This is where his origin was expanded with new details, even as he was kept under containment by S.H.I.E.L.D. due to his vastly yet uncontrollably escalating power, which happened to also be killing Jack. In the miniseries, Marcy Kane, who also happened to be kinda a Contraxian like Jack's mother who had come to Earth as they were still seeking an energy source. So Marcy took Jack back to Contraxia, where Jack actually saved Marcy and his mother's people by restarting their sun with his powers. Commander Varga and his group called the Survivalists had taken Jack up in a starship to the sun, and the spaceship was vaporized before Jack sent his energy into the dying sun. He had immense energy and heat on him afterwards, enough that he melted the Contraxian ice caps. And the Contraxians were unable to find a cure for Jack, so he decided to leave and decided to wander through space alone, not wanting to be around life with all the energy and heat he was still emanating. He didn't want to hurt anybody. And he did this for a while before being captured by a cosmic being named the Stranger. The Stranger took Jack back to his planet Laboratory World as a prisoner. After a time, the Squadron Supreme and Overmind attacked Laboratory World, which freed all of the Stranger's prisoners like Presence and Starlight. Jack was rescued by Quasar, who had ended up on the Stranger's planet. They all went back to Earth, where the Presence tricked Jack into attacking Quasar, and so he and Jack fought with each other. And in the fight, Presence pierced Jack's armor, and he seemingly exploded as his energy burst outwards. Turns out, though, that he didn't die. He was rescued by Moondragon, who nursed him back to health as she vied for the attention of Quasar and forced him to fight with Kismet. Eventually, Moondragon let Jack of Hearts go, freeing him from her mind control. Jack's suit was still damaged, though, and so he went to find Silver Surfer to help. On this journey, he met Torval, an armor smith imprisoned in a place called the Anvil, and he ended up making Jack a new suit. Here, Silver Surfer and Jack fought with Nebula and Gator. At first, Torval, though, said no to making him armor because he wanted to be paid, and Jack attacked him. But then Silver Surfer said he'd get a bigger shop to work in as payment, and so Torval agreed to making his new containment suit. Right after this is when Jack and Silver Surfer teamed up with Beta Ray Bill, Gladiator, Ganymede, and a couple of Galactus' former heralds named Morg and Terex to fight with a cosmic supervillain named Tyrant. They managed to defeat Tyrant, but the battle left Jack injured and weak after he released his energy to save his team of heroes. That's when he got closer to Ganymede, and he fell in love with her, and Jack stayed with Ganymede until a miniseries called Cosmic Powers, although she didn't really feel the same way about him. Shortly after he left Ganymede, he ran into the Infinites and almost died in the ensuing battle. So the Avengers and Moondragon came to Jack's aid, and they fixed Jack up, repaired his suit, and they all worked together to stop the Cosmic Infinites. Jack was then with Thor, Star Fox, Quasar, Tigra, and Photon when they were attacked by Galactic Patrol. Jack stayed with the Avengers even as the Kree turned Earth into a maximum security prison. Thor took this group to the Shi'ar, requesting to see the Imperial Majestrix Lilandra. In Avengers 35 at the Shi'ar Palace, Jack was talking with Wendell about the things he missed back on Earth, and Jack said he missed hot dogs and the Mets. Yes, Jack of Hearts is a Mets fan. Wendell said he missed kielbasa. That's not a team, that's a meat. But then the monstrous Rule attacked the Avengers and Jack stood side by side with them to fight heroically. The Rule captured them, and it turned out that it was the Kree Supreme Intelligence that had sent the Rule. After this ordeal, Jack and the Avengers went back to Earth. The first time in years for Jack, and they went to Avengers Mansion for sandwiches and coleslaw that Jarvis the butler had made. Jack was loving eating Earth food again and ate 2 cheeseburgers, and all this talk about food is making me hungry. The calm was quickly interrupted when Pagan attacked. When DC Comics JLA met the Avengers, Jack was one of the Avengers who rallied against Starro the Conqueror in Manhattan. Later, Wasp pulled Jack aside to recognize his help with the team while Iron Man was away, so they officially granted Jack membership to the Avengers. The Avengers gave Jack a neutral mist that would allow him to take off his containment suit for a brief period of time, 4.2 hours at first. Jack's powers continued to grow, and he spent more and more time in that chamber called a Zero Room, ultimately up to 14 hours per day. Jack then went with Captain America, Photon, and Scarlet Witch to assault Kang's base, called Damocles Base. Once in near-Earth orbit, Photon and Jack flew out into space to assault Kang's ship base. Kang destroyed their ship and nearly killed the Avengers, but Quasar and Living Lightning showed up to save them. So then Jack and the Avengers helped save Earth. "We won," Jack said, but Cap, amidst the rubble, told him, "Look around, nobody won here, Jack." During his stint with the Avengers team, Jack and Scott Lang argued. Jack called him Pym Light and Pym called him Jackass, but ultimately they got closer. In one long stint in his containment chamber, Jack grew angry and blew it and his suit apart. He was weakened and frail, and so Iron Man had him on a gurney and wheeled him to a treatment room. They discovered that he was in space for too long and that returning to Earth had accelerated the fission process in his cells, and so his armor, the Nutribus chamber, his healing factor, none of it was enough to keep his power at bay and contained. This is when Pym told him he'd need to be in containment for 14 hours now. In a retcon, Pym produced one of Jack's father's journals and revealed to him that Philip knew Marie was Contraxian, and that he continued to work on Zero Fluid, knowing what physiological changes his son would go through. That Zero Fluid, it turns out, was actually a dampening agent for his son. He didn't want anyone to know to protect Jack, and so he lied and told everyone it was a fuel source. Jack was angry about this and flew off. His temperament and anger had the team calling him the Jerk of Hearts. He became as explosive as his powers. Then when a U.S. bioweapons agent ravaged South Dakota, Cap forced Ant-Man and Jack to work together. She-Hulk was injured and Jack flew her away for aid, and he tried to draw the bioagent out of She-Hulk, but it pulled out all of her gamma radiation in the process, and she almost died, although she came back to life, but she was in a berserker rage. Jack's depression continued to grow, and he surrendered into his isolation. Some of them even thought Jack was no longer a team player, that he drew She-Hulk's radiation out on purpose. It wasn't true, and he said he was sorry even as Ant-Man slammed his chamber door shut for another 14 hours. Cap then had Ant-Man break Jack out of containment early to help stop a still rampaging She-Hulk. So he flew in and dive-bombed Hulk and She-Hulk, unleashing his energy and stopping them both. Now unconscious, they secured Jack to bring him back to his chamber. Jack helped when Scott Lang's daughter Cassie was abducted by a crazy person named Charles Cooley who wanted to replace his dead daughter Jessica. On the rescue mission, Jack was away from his containment chamber for too long and his power level reached a critical point even as his mind began to break down, so he flew into space and exploded safely in the vacuum of the cosmos above the Earth, out of the way of innocence. Innocence, I say, but Jack grabbed the shirt of the guy who'd abducted Cassie and pulled him up into space with him, and he died when Jack detonated. It was bittersweet. Scott had his daughter back, but he knew that he lost his friend in the process, a friend who sacrificed his life for him. It was selfless and the ultimate heroic act. He was a true Avenger. Then on May 5th, his Avengers file was deactivated, citing his deceased status. But his story was not done. As Scarlet Witch's mind broke down, she reanimated Jack's corpse and had his zombified body march through the front gate of Avengers Mansion, and Ant-Man walked out to see him just as Jack detonated his body, destroying the mansion and seemingly killing Scott Lang in the process. It was utter decimation and complete tragedy for the team, and the reverberations of this are still felt through Marvel Comics for decades to this day. His last words before he exploded were, "I'm sorry." Later, in the Erebus region of Hades, Jack is seen gambling at a slot machine, attempting to win his chance at resurrection from the afterlife. He hit it and cheered, "Yes, I'm next." During the Children's Crusade, the time-traveling boy version of Kang the Conqueror, known as Iron Lad, sent the team back to the point where Jack blew up Avengers Mansion and were able to rescue Scott Lang from the blast before he perished. They saw Jack pleading with Wanda to not make him die and to stop the madness, which helped snap her out of her altered state. Later, Project Pegasus was working with a new material called Zero Point Energy, and this formed itself into a new Jack of Hearts, though he knew not who he was. So Jill Harper, a security officer with Pegasus, along with Lamar Hoskins, formerly a Bucky to Captain America but now calling himself Battlestar, helped to fully revive Jack. And with him now conscious, his story ends with them making out with each other. Jack of Hearts is such a cool character with a devoted, loyal following, even though he's been off the table for many years. It could be that his story has been told fully, or it could be, as Fred Hembeck once said, that Marvel's artists refused to draw Jack's intricate, complicated costume for panel after panel. But when he ultimately does show up, and he will, we'll be there to talk about him some more. Until then, that's a wrap on this one, my friends. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and you'll be one of the first to know when I upload videos just like this each and every week. I'm Jesse, this is JLS Comics, and I'll see you soon.